have got a powerful discussion on tonight. I've set the tone. Let's get people on. We have just such an amazing discussion and dialogue that I'm going to get into on tonight. And the question that is being posed, the question is going to be proposed. Is there a difference between being married and playing married? Let me say that again. The difference between being married and playing together. That's living together in a relationship. So let's get everybody on. I'm Dr. Gary L. White. I'm the TikTok doctor, if you will, and I'm engaging in discussions that are designed to bring families together. Those of you who are on YouTube watching, I need you all to tune in and log on into this very important and meaningful discussion. Living together and playing married, the little r, versus being married, what I call the big M. So y'all come on in. We have to engage in this discussion. There's a lot of people that are living together and not married. There's a lot of people that are married and living together but not happy. But the question is there really a big difference between being married and playing married? That's living together in a relationship. So you all get somebody on, because I think this is going to be the discussion of discussions here. We are really going to engage in this. So you all, if you're on YouTube, and you're trying to follow me, just go to the Dr. GL White Show. If it's TikTok, it's the Dr. GL White, the same thing. But you all get someone on, because we have got a powerful discussion today. Is there a difference between being married and playing married? That's living together. Are the expectations different? And should those expectations be different? This is the discussion that I want to get into, because, there's some things that we got to figure out. Something happens. You've had situations, and we've seen where people have been living together for a number of years, and then they get married, and then something happens in the relationship. Something happens. The relationship is going well. They're living together. They get married. And then shortly after that, 3 to 5 years, then we run into a situation where now suddenly the marriage is not working out. So you all log on in. Tell somebody when we're going to get into it. Why am I bald? I mean, bald is what the reality is, man. But it's beautiful. It's bald. It's beautiful. So you all tell somebody. Tell someone and jump on into this. I see you, Ryan. I know you got a big question there, but if it's centering around this big piece here, is there a difference between being married, the expectations that come with it, and living together and playing married? I call that the little r. So you all tune on in. Y'all better bring someone in, especially those of you who are living together. So those of you who have just got married and now you're saying, look, it ain't no different. Everything's the same. Well, should there be a difference? And then I'm wondering in this dialogue today is whether or not men and women have a different understanding of those expectations. Something happens when people have been living together and they finally get married. Something happens. On that same note, there's something that happens when people are hesitant about getting married, especially, watch this, you all, if you all have lived together and been in a relationship for a long time, and then you finally decide to get married. Does something happen? Is there a change in the relationship? So you all log on in. I think this is going to be a great discussion here. I think it's an honest dialogue. A lot of what we talk about in this show here, particularly today, I think it's going to be very helpful, because it's going to really set the tone for a lot of people who are in relationships. And so y'all tell someone to log on in. Let's get into this discussion. We have to really look at it. So y'all tell someone, come on in. You see that red dot? Tell someone Dr. White is on again. So you all come on in. Tell someone before I get going. I see people are coming on in. I'm glad to see these folks logging on in. This is a good discussion here. And you all know, if you hadn't figured it out, my commitment, my passion, in my ministry is around building, sustaining, and maintaining healthy relationships and healthy marriage, healthy relationships, healthy co-parenting relationships, because I do know that sometimes the marriage does not work out, but that does not mean that the relationship doesn't. So but when we do look at that, what we do understand is that something has occurred in those expectations. So y'all get somebody on. Bring someone in. Dr. White is talking about living together versus being married. He is about to examine and pose the question of whether or not there is a difference between the two. So I'd like to set this whole tone up by really just kind of beginning with a fundamental question. And no, I tell you what, I'm going to just kind of run through a couple stats and you all kind of tell me what you think here. Now, if you think about it, let's start with the big picture. So over the last few decades here in the United States, marriage rates have declined while cohabitation, meaning living together, has grown steadily. So today, more than half of the adults between the ages of 18 and 44 are living together. And this has grown and this continues to grow. So we have to kind of take a look at that. Nearly half, y'all, I'm setting the tone here, nearly half of all couples cohabitate before they live together. Some folks call that road testing. But nearly half the people cohabitate before they even live together. But research shows that cohabitating relationships, think about this, are less stable than the former ones. So something is happening here because people are in these relationships. They're not married. It gets unstable. Those people who are in marriage, we're beginning to see a decline. So we have some questions. We have some discussions. We have some dialogue. So y'all tell someone, come on in here. Let's take a look at this discussion and let's engage in it. So let me see who we got here. I see a lot of people coming on in. Y'all tell someone, especially if you're contemplating getting married. You all take a look at this and let's see what we can find ourselves getting into on this day. So y'all come on in. I see you, Wallace. Glad to have you on here, Cecilia Wallace. Tell someone we are going to keep the marriage. I like that, the shout out y'all giving to Jesse Jackson. I'm going to say to keep the hope alive in that regard, keep the marriage, keep the relationship alive. You all, so that's what we're doing here. So I'm pushing this, and I'm definitely going to continue to make an issue of this because I think it's really important. And let me just say, even for when we even just pause for a second and even began to think about some of the African American, just to focus on African American relationships in general, we see now that only about 31 to 33% of black adults are currently married, compared to roughly 48% of all adults, and we see that information came from Black demographics. So we see that roughly 50% of Black adults have never been married. And so there's a pause, right? This is the highest rate among all the other racial groups. So there's a hesitation around this. However, cohabitation, we see, has become very common. That's living together. And many cohabitating couples are raising children together. So y'all get somebody on. Y'all log on so we can get into this discussion here. We have to do something in this dialogue of being married versus playing married. And you all understand, I'm not honing in on either one. I'm just saying that we have to begin to examine whether or not there are differences. We have a divorce rate right now among African Americans is higher than the national average. And so even in there, where we're seeing about 40% of those marriages ending in the divorce within 20 years. And I'm going to tell you, those first 5 to 7 years, it's even more frightening. So I want you all, let's get ready to talk about this discussion. Let's take a closer look around whether or not, and I have some areas that I think we have to begin to take a look at. Why? Because there's such a high number of children that are being raised in single parent, female headed households. So there's some type of countering that we have to take a look at. So I want you all to hone on in. I want you all to get ready for an amazing discussion. And here are the parameters. The questions that I'm going to ask is whether or not there are differences in being married versus living together and cohabitating when it comes to, for example, financial management of the money. Is a difference, or should there be around the level of commitment? What about the parental responsibilities, right? Is there a difference? And should there be? What about the legal status? What does it mean to be legally married? And, there was a time in this country that there was a thing called common law. Some states, for example, Georgia has eliminated the concept of a common law, but there was a time that common law was a form of marriage. That means you've held yourself out. Y'all got bills and everything. You're acting as if you are married, but those differences do vary. And then, of course, in family status. So y'all tell somebody, I'm Dr. G.L. White, the TikTok doc, and this is the discussion that we're going to certainly move ourselves into. So let's be honest. Some people are in relationships living like they're married, and some people are married but acting like they're single. Y'all missed that. Let me take another shot. Some people are in relationships living like they're married, and there's some people who are married but they're acting like they're single. So that means that in this moment, I'm not necessarily bashing or going in on people living together. I'm saying that there's some issues on both of those ends. So y'all tell somebody, and let's get into this. I see some people are logging on. Y'all, let's jump into this discussion because I want to start with this basic question. When it comes to financial management, right? If you're living together but not married, should the money still be considered ours? Joint money. Should there be joint accounts? If you're living together but not married, that's the first question I'd love to hear from someone of whether or not it makes a difference. I'm kind of curious about that. Whether or not you're living together, do you share the money the same way? A powerful question, something that I think needs to be posed. And I'd like to hear some comments on that. If you're not married but you're living together, should the money be combined? Should we look at the accounts the same way if you're not married? I'd love to hear some comments around that, because that's a good, honest, and open dialogue that we have to look at. Or is it wise or risky? Let me try it that way. Is it wise or risky to build wealth with someone if you're not legally married? So, powerful question. I want to pose. I want to present. I'd love to hear some comments. I'm Dr. Gary L. White, and everything that I do here centers around fatherhood. It centers around family. It centers around marriage. It centers around building healthy relationships. And so we're really kind of jumping in. I'm going to tell you, as people contemplate that, the big M, being married, versus the little r, being in a relationship and living together, is there a difference in the expectations? Is there a difference in the expectations? Right? Should the money be combined? It's a doggone honest question. Should we be combining the money if we're not married? Is there a risk of investing in things together with someone you're living with? Should we do that? I'm just kind of curious of whether or not that's a good idea or not. Is that a risky thing? Is that a risky thing to consider? When you look at it, and we're being honest now, I'm going to start on this one and say that when I began to look at the differences, you all, right? So when it really comes to that thing called the financial management, what we do know is that this implied, when you're married, a lot of times, it implies shared financial responsibility and their legal ties to assets and debts and taxes and long-term planning. We see that when you're married, but it might differ slightly when you're in a relationship. That means that finances typically remain, and we've seen this sometimes, they're separate, right? Expected is not necessarily expected that the income are going to be combined. There may be some shared bills, and that's that part of the hobosexual I've been talking about, H-O-B-O, hobosexuals I talked about. Go on my TikTok, you'll see that discussion there. So we might see it there, but the contributions and obligations are negotiated privately. But we do know when you're married, in that finance, those assets, one of my favorite attorneys that I watch her and her husband all the time, she talks about when you get married, you might have bought that house. You might have bought that house before y'all got married, but since y'all been together, when the divorce comes, that shared assets, that equity, when you're married, oh, it's split. One of my favorite songs, when you think about it, y'all heard the song "It's Cheaper to Keep Her." Well, that's the legal distinctions that are being made. So I think that's an honest and open discussion and dialogue that we have to really kind of take a look at, of whether or not there really are some differences in that regard. So y'all, examine that. I'm kind of curious. I'm gonna see if I have any comments here. Got no comments yet, but that sets the tone. And so I think it's something that we have to really begin to examine. Playing married, what I see when you're playing married, as opposed to being married around financial management, the debt. People go into debt together. They buy stuff together. I don't see much of it on the flip side around wealth building or money managing. But what I do see is that people go in because somebody's credit may be better than the other person's credit. And so we began to kind of see that as a difference. So so we see that as a big difference there. That's number one, right? But again, I'm wondering whether or not women see that there's a difference in that, whether or not women have the expectation that when we're living together, that we should combine our income. Hell, if you think about it, there might be some married people who've never combined any aspect of their income. One of the things I do see, though, for those of you who are marriage therapists and counselors, one of the things that we do see people who are married, but they manage their money like roommates. And that's a whole nother discussion. But I do see that phenomenon is really common when someone has been living together a good while and then they get married and they continue the financial management the way they did before they were married. So you all tell someone, log on in. We are talking about whether or not there's a difference between being married, the big M, and playing married, that I call the little r, right? Being in a relationship. And we just took a closer look at the financial management side of it. It's a good question. And I think it's something that I think it's a good question that we have to kind of ponder a little bit. Now, we see financial management, but what about the definition of commitment? And I'm wondering, does commitment look different when you're married versus when you're in a relationship, or should that commitment be the same? That's a very interesting question that we have to kind of hone in on. That is that if the commitment level may very well differ. So tell me what you think. The commitment, if you're living together, is the expectations around commitment the same as if you were married? And should the commitment be the same? That's a good question that we have to take a closer look at in marriage, right? Marriage is a proof of commitment. It comes with the paperwork. right? But can someone be committed in a relationship more than they would be if they were married? Now, there are some people who actually take the position, I don't need no paperwork. I don't need no pay. I don't need no legal documents to prove that I'm married or to accentuate my commitment. And for some people, that may be a very, very strong argument. Let me see what some people have to say, because I think that's a strong argument that someone can bring forward. But that commitment level, it does tend to look different, right? And so here's what I mean. In a formal marriage, the concept of commitment, again, it's a formal public, it's a formal public document, and is legally recognized as a form of commitment, right? And it's, it comes with the prominence, and if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it, right? So commitment is a formal demonstration, even to public, that you're there. But commitment in a relationship, right? Does that differ? Now, some people have argued that in a relationship, commitment can be defined by the couple. Y'all can set the determination, and it can range from a casual to deeply committed, and sometimes be ambiguous. One of the things that we do recognize is that I tell people, if you're not married and you're in a relationship, no matter how long you've been in that relationship, every once in a while you need to do a check-in, right? Are we still monogamous? Are we still connected? It does not hurt, because there's nothing more frightening when you are the little r in a relationship and it's masquerading as a marriage. There's nothing worse than having a completely different understanding of the relationship than what your what the person you're living with has. And so we see that there's a big difference. And so those are some powerful questions, things that I think we literally have to pose and put up there in terms of whether or not there's a difference between the two. And I'm saying that this is a discussion that you have to have at the point where you move in with someone, because we do see, as I said at the beginning of this, the rate of cohabitation, or people living together, it continues to increase, right? We're seeing something different happen with marriage, but people are road testing. They're living together, and some people have been living together a long time. So I'm just kind of curious, right? Does that paper matter? Ladies, does the paper matter? Men, brothers, does having that paperwork really matter in a relationship? So it's something we want to pause, something we want to put up there. A question that we want to really pose in terms of that. Now, there's another one. Now, this one here is a little bit more concrete than anything, right? Whether or not there's a difference between being married and living together when we talk about the legal status, right? So if you're living together, and this may vary, let me put this disclaimer out. This actually may vary a little bit by the state that you're living in. This may vary a little bit by the country that you're living in. But it does not prevent you from getting the clarity and asking the important questions around that. So when you're married, for example, you have the automatic legal rights, right? Inheritance, medical decision making, the spouse. When you get married, when they ask the question of the next of kin, you have to understand the concept of next of kin. Y'all could have been living together for 40 years, 50 years. And when they call for next of kin, you may have felt like you're the next of kin all those years, right? Let's say if you had a strained relationship with the children of your spouse, and something happens, and then it's time to notify the next of kin. If you are married, I don't care if y'all been separated for 30 years. If you are married, then that spouse is the next of kin. So we see there's some differences here, right? If you're not married, that's a little different, right? So there are no automatic rights. That requires legal documents and other things like that that have to be put in place around protections. So being married is a big thing. And I know some of you might be listening to this and saying, well, that's common sense. And I'm going to always counter and say, well, sense is not always that common, right? And if it was that common, then we would see a big difference in these two, the big M, which is married, and the little r. So, we pose these questions. So, and this is a good one here that I want to kind of put here. Even if you have a child born out of wedlock, I'm wondering, does the father have the same, should the father have the same rights to the child that the mother does, right? And so these are some powerful questions that we have to begin to put up and that we have to examine. I'm Dr. Gary O. White, and I'm pushing this. I'm a professor. I teach at a university. I provide the counseling. I do the groups. I cover it all. Why? Because I'm committed to strengthening and building families. And one of the cornerstones of that is an understanding of the type of relationship that you have. So when I'm talking about the big M, marriage, versus the little r in a relationship, and living together and trying to determine whether or not there's a difference in the expectations, or should the expectations be different. And so this is a big piece here that we have to take a look at, because even when it comes to being out in the world, your social life and your freedom, we see that when you're married, right, social decisions are interconnected. There's some expectations, or are they? When you married, is there an expectation that you go come home at a reasonable time? Should there be an expectation that you come home at a reasonable time? Or is that the same rule if y'all were living together? Right? So it's a question. And anyone who's contemplating getting married, these are some valuable things. If you are in premarital counseling right now, and you have to make sure that whoever's facilitating that training spends a good amount of time in this area right here, just focusing on the differences in expectations between being married and being in a relationship, especially if you have children together, y'all live together, you have all of these, you are holding yourselves out as married. And the question that we're really contemplating here is that enough, right? So we have to kind of take a look at that and be honest and authentic with those questions, right? So, the question of, well, we're basically married is the same as saying you're being married. And so we look at these questions, we examine them, we take a slow walk through them, because I believe that these are some things that we have to truly kind of examine, right? These kind of questions in relationships, these are the type of questions when you're moving through and you're contemplating getting married. These are the type of things that you have to take a look at. And what I mean here, we got a couple more, but here's what I'm getting at. If a certain pattern or behavior has been established in a relationship, right? So we think about these three stages. You go from being in a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever they call it nowadays, to being engaged, to being married. So these are three separate stages. What I want to hone in on in this dialogue here is I'm really kind of getting fixated on the engagement phase, because you all, during this engagement phase, this is the time that we really work to get clarity in these areas. And so I'm telling you all, bring someone on. Tell someone that you know that are living together. Bring someone on. Have them have that conversation. Good to see you, Mr. Wallace. Glad to have you on. So glad to have you on. So these are the questions that we pose. These are the questions that we honestly take a real live look at of whether or not there's a difference. So when you look at this social life, does having children without marriage change the responsibility or the perception? It's a question that we got to look at. Should the parenting obligations depend on love, loyalty, or both? Right? And so we take our time to examine and really jump into these questions. Now, this next one here, before we double back and take a look at them, this next one here, remember you all, we're talking about the big M, which is marriage versus the little r of being in a relationship. And so with this big one here, when it comes to having children, if you're not married, should the responsibility or the rights be the same? I'm kind of curious. Should the responsibility or the rights be the same? That's a question we have to take an honest look at, a question we have to really engage ourselves in, because we see in Georgia, for example, if y'all don't notice, if you're not in the state of Georgia, I sometimes tell people that Georgia is one of the last states in the United States that you want to have a child born out of wedlock, right? Now, anyone who has been in my YouTube channel and you've listened to me on my YouTube channel, Dr. G.L. White, or Instagram or TikTok, it's all the same. You see the discussion that I have about having a child born out of wedlock in the state of Georgia, because in this one here, we see that there's a big difference between being married when it comes to children and being in a relationship. So, my favorite one, I want to pause and go into this because it's a big difference. When it comes to being married, in the event the relationship goes awry, the father has rights. The father has the same amount of legal rights, where the only difference is around the custody or the shared custody. So we see that when it comes to being married. But so we're therefore, the father's legal relationship with the child is established, right, when you're married. But in the state of Georgia, y'all have to understand that when you're not married in the state of Georgia, that father doesn't have those rights. As a matter of fact, even if he signed the birth certificate, so this is when y'all start bringing people on and say, y'all better listen to this, right? It doesn't matter if you signed the birth certificate, that don't give you no more rights. If your name is, if the child has your last name, that doesn't give you any more rights. If you're living with the child and you wasn't married to the mother, you still have no rights to the child, because unfortunately, the definition of responsible fatherhood, I would say, is narrowly refined to your financial obligation. So when you're not married, responsible fatherhood is in a form of meeting that financial obligation. But in order for a father to have the rights, like if he were married to the mother, there's a legal process that father has to engage in. And I'm telling you all this right now. I've been working with non-custodial parents and parents for over 30 years, supervising visitation, monitoring visitations, participating in neutral exchanges. I've been doing that in the state of Georgia for over 30 years, doing mediations and workshops around co-parenting. This is the world that I've lived in. This is what I teach at the university. And so what I'm getting at here is that the difference when it comes to the family status, it's different if you are not married to the mother. And the distinction that I am making is that in order for a father to actually get to the point where he has the same amount of say-so as a married father, so then this is what he has to do. Number one, he has to, and it's very uncomfortable, but this is our truth. He has to take the mother to court and sue her to first establish a legal, and let me back it up. first thing he has to do is establish a legal relationship, right? So this is what plain married but not being married look like. He has to establish a legal relationship with the child. That's called legitimation. That is the part that allows the child to inherit from the father and the father to inherit from the child. Remember I told y'all that thing about that next of kin, or if someone becomes disabled and the disability benefits, right? So once a father has legitimized the child or establishes that legal relationship, even in the foster care world, when they talk about first placement, best placement, or putting a child up for adoption, when paternity is established and legitimation is complete, then that father, for the most part, is protected. So this three-step process for a father who was not married to the mother to have the same rights as a father who was married to the mother and the relationship with the bride, he has to first legitimize the child. The process of making the child, the process of making the child legal. So now, once the father has legitimized the child, he still doesn't have the right to be physically involved in the child's life. He still does not have the right to participate in school functions. I see you, Dr. Jones. Glad to have you. He still does not have the right to participate in after-school activities. So what has to happen when a father has a child born out of wedlock after he has legitimized the child? Then here's the uncomfortable part. He has to then sue the mother for visitation rights. That's right. He has to sue the mother. This is a very difficult process. Last week when I was on my podcast, and you all remember, I do this every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. sharp. But I'm telling you, on last week, I talked about how uncomfortable many men are with moving through that legal process. And as uncomfortable and as frightening as it is, we're talking about the big M married versus the little r being in a relationship. As uncomfortable as it is, he has to engage in this process. But I'm going to ask this question, and y'all help me out. Should a father have to go through all of that, right? If he's living with the child and he's not married, should that father have the same rights as the mother? I'm kind of curious about that. Should he have those same rights? Should he have the same say-so? I think it's a worthy question, but that's the difference. We talk about the big M versus the little r. That's the big difference right there in terms of having those rights. And what I'm going to say is that the hesitation of a little men who have been living the life in the little r, and that little r, that relationship that went astray, and now that father wants to be involved in the child's life, then here is when he is introduced to the true difference between the big M and the little r. Because in that moment that relationship goes astray and he wants to be involved in that child's life, it is when the courts and the legal system formally let him know you have been a little r, a relationship masquerading as a big M. So step one, legitimation. Step two, then, wait, you know what? Let me back that up a little bit. Step one is paternity, establishing paternity, right? So we got a three-step: establishing paternity, legitimation, and then the visitation or joint custody. So it's a three-step process here, right, y'all? I'm just right now really going in on the difference between the big M, marriage, and little r in a relationship. That's a three-step process. I'm asking, should a father have to go through all that? If it goes through, if he's doing everything he's supposed to but not married, should he have the same rights? Should he have the same say-so? I'd love to see some comments on that as they come across. But I'm going to tell you this: establishing paternity is a frightening thing. Why? Because of the process of doing it. So I'm curious if anyone knows the most common way, I'm going to say, paternity gets established. If you are thinking through DNA tests, I'm going to tell you to look it up because you might be surprised. The most common way paternity may very well be established is through verbal acknowledgement. That means you show up. Pretty JC, I see you. That means you show up, and you're trying to get visitation, or you're brought into a child support court, and because you're the little R in that relationship, and that relationship has dissolved, now you go into court, and the thing that you now all of a sudden run into is that you're asked, are you the father? If you verbally say yes, then paternity is established. That's one way paternity is established for those of you living the life as a little R. Another way paternity is established, and right, because this is the first step with everything. Another way paternity is established is that you have been properly served. That's right, you have been properly served, but for whatever ungodly reason, you missed the court date. You've been properly served, but you missed the court date. This is not like you missed class and then you go and bring a doctor's excuse and then the judge makes a determination of whether or not the excuse is acceptable or not. I'm telling you that if you have been properly served for child support court and you miss it, then child support is going to be served by default. I mean, let me back up. Not only the paternity, but the child support. So the second common way we see paternity being established is that you missed the court date. I'm talking about the life as a little R when it comes to family status and identity. So paternity is established. You've gone there. You've accepted it. Now, if I had my way, I would have every couple on the planet that if you were not married at the time the child was born, I would have every couple on the planet go through the process of doing the DNA test. You need to know that for certain. Now, there may be some others on here who could find themselves being offended and might take the position, he know he the father. And I'm going to tell you, that might be a great point. He know he the father. However, it doesn't hurt because you are 100% sure that he's the father. There's nothing wrong with him being just as sure as you are. And so the life of a little R, when we look at it and pay attention to it, I'm telling you, it's frightening in that regard. So paternity gets established. That's step one, the life of the little R. And then he has to legitimize the child. There was a time in Georgia that they had in-hospital paternity and legitimation being done at the same time. But no sooner than those two things got combined, they got separated again. So, and so we kind of see that as an issue. But the paternity, step one, the legitimation, step two, and then step three, now you're seeking visitation. And everything I'm telling you all in this journey, someone might ask the question, well, how come women, or how come the custodial parent doesn't have to go through all that when it comes to child support? And I'm going to tell you they do. The only difference is the state does it for them. And so what I'm offering up for you, step one, paternity, step two, legitimation, and then step three, seek visitation. But I'm going to tell you this, don't go trying to get visitation, life is a little R, and at the same time, at the same exact time, you questioning whether or not the child is yours. So I will tell you, you don't get to have it both ways. Either you are 100%, if you don't get the DNA test, either you are acknowledging that the child is yours without question, and then you proceed to get legitimation visitation rights, or if you even slightly have a beyond a reasonable doubt and you need to get the DNA test, and I'm going to tell you, do that first. Because there's been so many cases and there have been so many efforts in across states where you've had individuals who have raised a child 3, 4, 5, 7 years and then discover that the child was never theirs. And so when we have these type of realities, it's not unusual to hear the non-custodial parents, the men, say, I want that money back, or she lied. And then it is in that point that you actually realize that when you find yourself all the way back to court, when you went to child support court, Either you verbally acknowledged it or you missed the court date. Either way, here's what we do recognize is that when you do that, and that big piece here, it becomes a big difference. So I want to tell everyone, you all, I'm Dr. Gary O. White, the TikTok doctor. I'm a professor, a therapist. I work with couples. I work with individuals. It is my ministry. It is my work around strengthening, strengthening relationships and strengthening families. And this is how we do it. So you all, I'm pushing. Anthony, man, I was wondering where you at, man. You just now get here. Glad to have you here. So the point that we're seeing, the big M versus the little r, right? The big M is married versus the little r. And the question that I've been posing today is there a difference in the expectations? Should there be a difference in the expectations? So I'm just dancing around this last one because I wanted to make sure that that you all took a deep dive in understanding what it means when you have a child born out of wedlock, the little r. Now, if you're married and the relationship goes astray, then what we do know is that you as a father, the only thing left is negotiating the matters of custody. But all that other stuff, paternity and all that stuff around legitimation, it's a done deal. That's the difference between the big M, being married, versus the little r. So we have to kind of pause and really take our time to jump in this, because the expectations, they do change. And I'm saying here, the question that I'm backing up and I'm asking you all now, it should, when you go from being in a relationship and then you get married, should the expectations change? Is there a difference in the expectations? Y'all better chew on that. Should there be? Now, some people are going to say, well, no, I used to go out and hang with my friends and do all that. Just because I got married, I can't do those things. Is that a legitimate argument? You and your girls, right? You and your girls, y'all have done those girl trips and y'all put y'all money together, no thought, no consideration. And the question is, well, should there be? That's a tough one, Brother Jones. I agree with you. But these are the things we're going to contemplate. These are the issues that we have to take a look at. Now, here's the next question that I'm going to pose. The big M, marriage versus the little r. A family member wants to borrow money from you. A family member wants to borrow money from you. Now, let's see here. I say it's one under God's marriage. Yeah, but when you're married versus not, there's some legal differences there too. So I see what you're saying, Brother Jones, but there's some, I'm trying to kind of get us to examine that, because I agree with you spiritually that especially when two people come together and they're joined under and produce a child, I think it's beautiful. But how about this? If someone wants to borrow money from you, your consideration, if you're married, is that a dialogue that you're going to have with your wife? Or if you're not married, is that a dialogue that you have? Or are you not obligated to have that dialogue if you weren't married? Think about that. You had a child, a family member come, and it's a good family member, right? So don't y'all complicate my scenario. I'm not talking about some untrusted family member or some shiesty family member. I'm saying a family member has come and they need to borrow some money. And I'm asking that what is the expectation in marriage? And is it the same if you are not married? Family member says, I need to borrow $500 or $1,000. What does that look like? And that's an honest discussion that I think we have to really kind of take a look at, because these are some of the things I'm telling you all that complicates relationships. This is the part that I want us to hone in on. These are the things that can complicate marriages, And these are the things that can complicate relationships. Um, um, right. And so we look at this here and say, I gave, but also had combo with with your child mother. All right, it's a good thing to do. So there we go. Once again, we see that people are you'll give the money, but you still have the conversation. But the question is, should there be an expectation that you're going to have that conversation if y'all living together? Remember, that's a little R, playing married. Should that expectation be the same that you have that conversation? I don't know. The question becomes, does it impact the relationship, whether you're married or not? All right. And so these are some really big questions that we have to pose as we move through this. I'm giving you all this for everyone who's watching here. Be sure to follow me. Right, communication is key in all that we do, and I'm going to tell you all. Continue to follow me. Go to my YouTube. Check it out. Stay here on the TikTok. Whenever you see that red light at 6:30 on Tuesday evening, just understand I'm going live. And if I change the date, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to send that notification out, because I'm literally giving things and I'm sharing information here that I want you to just sit down with the person you're with and have that dialogue, have that conversation with, because we do see definitely that there is a difference in the expectations. We definitely see that that's where the challenges began to take place, because again, in relationship counseling and marriage counseling, if you're seeing a therapist, it becomes a very important thing that I'm going to tell you to have that discussion and that conversation with around expectations. Because some people get married, and just because the proposal came forward, right? Just because it was a beautiful proposal and everybody came and showed up and it was absolutely a beautiful thing, I get it. But then you have the responsibility of beginning to do the work. You all, I'm going to come on here, and when I get probably next week or the week after next, I'm going to come on here and I'm going to have a conversation of some things that I need you all to truly consider when you're engaged, right? I'm going through a divorce, brother. I really don't expect nothing, right? Well, again, if you have children and you're going through that divorce, there's a lot of rights that you probably didn't give any thought to. But what we do know is that from walking people through the discussion of what takes place in premarital counseling to having a discussion about the impact of a divorce on the children, I think all these things here, when we're honest and authentic with ourselves, are absolutely critical in this process. I'm offering up here, though, and I'm offering up and giving you all these pieces here because I think it's time, if we're going to increase the number of relationships of people that stay together, if we're going to have any success in increasing the quality of the marriage, and that's a big deal here when we're talking about the differences here, that we have to begin to take a look at it. But what we do know is that even when relationships go astray, the hostility and all the unresolved emotional issues will show up. But the expectations, before we even get there and we start looking at some of the contributing factors to the demise of some of our cohabitating relationships and the demise of some of our relationships, has a lot to do around the shifts in the expectations. And so I'm offering this up because I think it's a great opportunity to actually have a conversation in the relationship about the expectations. And I think it's important that we constantly do check-ins around the expectations. So let's do a quick recap. The first question I posed was there a difference in being married versus in a relationship when it came to financial management. And what I shared here is that we might see that oftentimes when you're married, we are likely to see some combinations and some shared income, but we'll see that someone, when you're not married and living together, those expectations may very well be different. But what I'm saying here is that in cohabitating relationships, you probably see an accumulation of debt connected to one person having better credit than the other, right? But when the relationship goes astray, that debt is still going to be there. So the question I pose there is, if you're living together but not married, should the money be combined? Should you look at it the same, or should you look at it different? And then I talked about the commitment. When you're married, it's a legal document. But when you're not married, it's a private agreement defined by the couple. And so let's take a look at all these. Let's examine all of these. I think these points and these pieces are very critical and very important than all that we do here. So we went from the definition of commitment. We're talking about the parenting responsibilities and obligations. And I shared with you that the difference between being married and being in a relationship, the difference is a legal status, because as a when you are married, you have certain legal rights. And then we went and looked at the legal protection. And that was a big one. When you're married, things such as next of kin, things such as who makes a power of attorney, and things of that regard, I said that it makes a big difference when you're married. If you're not married, there's a legal process and work that you have to do to establish that power of attorney in life and in death. And then we talked about the parenting rights. And we paused and examined that there's a difference between being married and being in a relationship, because I said when you are married, you as a non-custodial parent, you have full rights to the child. But if you were not married, there's a 3-step legal process that I talked about, from paternity to legitimation to visitation rights. And we acknowledged, and I talked about last week, that you have a lot of people are hesitant, especially men, are hesitant about engaging the court system, because some go in as plaintiffs and they come out as defendants. A lot of times we only conceptualize the courts as defendants and as rather than plaintiffs, but we do know trying to seek visitation rights. If you were not married to the mother, understand that child support establishment is going to be put in place. So that's work in that regard. And then finally, we talked about the social freedoms and expectations and family status. All of those things we saw in this process, that it's an incredibly big difference. And so I'm talking about, and spent much of my time this last hour just talking about the difference between being in a relationship, right, the little r, versus being married. I'm not judging, not passing judgment. What I am simply saying is that I think it's time for a communication tune-up. I think it's also time for a status tune-up, that you all begin to take close inventory. This is particularly important where there are children involved. And that's why we pose and we talk about the big M is marriage versus little r. So I said all of that. As powerful as I chose it to be, I'm going to just close out by just making a few things. So, all right, family, that's the wrap up. And that's how we're going to kind of lock this thing up about the big M versus the little r. Remember, it's not the label that defines your love. It's your responsibility or your legacy. It's the choice you make every single day. If you want more insight, real talk, and practical advice on relationships or co-parenting or family dynamics, head over to my YouTube page. Tune in more to this this TikTok. You all like, join, subscribe. I can't wait for you all to be a member. I have a lot of products that are going to be coming out pretty soon. I think it's important, right? So I want you to hit that subscribe button. I want you to drop comments when you can and keep the conversation going, because the discussion does not stop here. So I'm going to tell you to stay thoughtful, stay intentional, and as always, Keep evaluating life. I'm Dr. Gary O. White. I call myself for this the TikTok doc, the YouTube doc, the Instagram doc. I want you all to tune in. I want you all to share this discussion with someone. And I cannot wait to see you become one of my faithful followers. So until then, y'all tune in. I'm about to bring some psychologists in, some LPCs in. I'm about to surround us with some experts that will be joining me via live very soon. So you all look out for the updates. So until then, until next week, I'm Dr. G.L. White, and this is the Dr. G.L. White, the TikTok live and the YouTube live and the Instagram live. Y'all come see me and holler at me. Take care. And of course, God bless. See you soon. Woo, that was a lot. It was exciting. It's breathtaking. Take care.